On and get started whenever you'd like.
Awesome. Well, let me share my screen. I know everybody's off video, but uh, just a thumbs up that y'all can see this, I think.
Yes.
Okay,
Yep.
cool. Awesome. Audible thumbs ups are awesome. So cool. Yeah, Mary, thanks so much for letting me do this. And thanks y'all for joining. I am very passionate about this topic. Mostly because of, and we'll get through it as we get through the presentation. Mostly because if we don't do it right, it sets us up as customer marketers to be really unhappy and really unhealthy in many, many different ways. And this is a hard learned lesson that I've had along the way that got me into a lot of trouble, both from a health perspective, but I would also say from a relationship standpoint, not just with my own personal relationships, but my relationship with work and my relationship and how I valued myself and valued my own programs. I will preface this, which this is my learned experience. If you're in a situation where this does not play, I'm not going to say you're doing it wrong. There is no wrong way of doing this. But hopefully by the end, we can all sort of see that there might be a healthier way of doing this that we can all get behind. So the general concept here is how money, influence, content producer, any other number specific metric shouldn't be the end all be all of what makes our program successful and how we judge that. I'm going to just close this there. There we are. And so a little bit about who I am. My name is Daniel Palay. I'm the Director of Customer Advocacy at a company called Grafana Labs. It's not that important what Grafana Labs does. We're just in the observability space. We're in the open source space. I've been here for 3.5 years now. And over that time, our team, if we want to throw out number metrics, and this is the last time I'm going to do it, we have produced, I think, over 170 pieces of content, and we've affected somewhere around $36.05 million in closed won deals. There's a reason why I'm going to say that's the last time I'm going to mention that. And that's because we don't measure our success, our value based off numeric things. I'll get to that in a little bit. Personally, I'm based in San Jose, California. Originally, I'm from Mountain View, California. So if you want to know what Mountain View was like before Google existed, I'm happy to tell you about it. Outside of work, I play ice hockey. I am the assistant winemaker at our family's vineyard, and I am hurriedly getting our house ready because as of today, we are 1 month away from the due date of our brand new baby boy. And if you just heard that, you can hear my cat complaining in the background because he is, like most cats, indifferent to a new thing, entity, whatever, coming into the house. So what are we going to be talking about today? And please, if you have questions, if you have chats, well, please chat. Mary, if you can watch it, I can't see it. Please interrupt me. Or if y'all just speak, there's a lot of open discussion happening throughout this presentation. So I wanted to set the stage of why it's important. I set that a little bit about my own personal journey. And we're going to have some open discussion because this should be about learning from each other. Like I said, I am one person. I am one learned experience. There are a lot of other learned experiences on this call. And if I can do the math correctly, it says there are 19. So that means there are 18 other learned experiences on this call. I'll have a couple questions back to you after we go through that. And at the end, I kind of have what I might consider a controversial value metric and the reason behind it. Let's get started. Why are we talking about this? I listed some questions here that often come up when I think about value. And I would imagine that anytime somebody on this call or in the community or at your business says, how do you measure value? You get a little bit of that stomach acid, right? You get a little of that spielkiss, to borrow a Yiddish phrase from my grandmother. And it's hard to talk about. It's hard to codify, and you think, why are we doing this? Well, because how else are we supposed to keep this job in this climate, right? We have to show that value. We have to we have to show something, right, to prove it, because all of those higher ups are like, it's only about money, right? It's only about deal velocity. It's only about X. as we go through this, I'll challenge you that we've actually given up the power of how to like of defining value and let other people define it for us, and that's why that we feel that way. Because again, that's what people we work for care about. They hired us, so they care about what we do. But at the same time, they hired us because we said that we were going to do something. And then all of a sudden, we got into this role and we're like, hey, how should we measure value? Well, guess what? The moment we do that, we've given away the power to define what success looks like for ourselves. And this is another one where I go back to feeling unhealthy, right? Because we don't feel appreciated. So we have to come up with something validated. You're like, I produced this case study. I did all of these things for this conference and nobody said thank you, or they thank this other person, or they're like, oh yeah, what have you done for me lately? And so you just keep adding and adding and adding and try to find all of these different things. We're like, no, look, seriously, we're providing value. But again, you've let other people define what that value is. Relatedly, who doesn't want to be that person? You're like, I'm that guy. I'm the guy that did this thing. I'm the person that did this thing. I feel cool. I feel validated. I feel like I'm really awesome and irreplaceable at this company. And then finally, this was actually the last one that I added. Not just it's obvious because it's the last bullet point, but it was one that really came to me as I was thinking about all of the amazing people in this community. We have a lot of luminaries. We have a lot of visionaries. And so when somebody speaks, when somebody shares like, hey, I accomplished this, I accomplished that, our program did X, our program did Y, the rest of us kind of feel, I don't know about you, but I kind of feel a little bit like if they're doing that and they're awesome, I'm not doing that, so I must not be awesome, right? There's that little imposter syndrome, right? You're like, I'm comparing myself against somebody else. But again, I go back to how I started this. We're all in, while we're all in this together in terms of the roles, each one of us has a unique story. So to compare yourself against other people in this space, it is completely unfair to you, and it is completely unfair to everybody else. So don't put that pressure on yourself. So this is where I'm going to take a step back because I know I've been talking for 12 minutes or so. I want to do some open discussion here. And I started this in CMA Weekly Slack with two basic questions. And we're going to take them one at a time because I think this helps frame where people's mindset is. If y'all want to share it in the chat, I can look at it. Or if you want to come off mute, I think it's very valuable to hear from our friends, from our peers. And also, I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing the sound of my voice. So we'll start with the first question. Oh, sorry, Mary, do you have a point?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Alexi asked to have you drop the link to the family winery as
Oh,
well.
I can definitely do that. It's actually, so fun fact, my in-laws have a vineyard on their property. It's 300 vines. We make all of the wine in-house. It's actually right next, it's underground. So we do it every year. In fact, bottling for last year's harvest, I believe, is like, I don't know, 2 weeks after baby's supposed to be born. So that'll be fun. But we have, last year we got 1,660 pounds of grapes, which translates into 130 gallons of estate grown and made Cabernet Sauvignon. So that's the story of the family winery. Since we're not a bonded winery, I can't sell it, but we take donations. So if you're ever in the Bay Area, we just sort of give it out to friends.
I'm just here for the serious, important topics. Sorry to derail.
Hey, it's totally fine. I will talk about wine, hockey, whatever, anytime, any place. Bonus if you throw in chocolate questions. But
and that's a truly valid, Alexi.
But anyway, so the first question I have here is, what is the top line value metric that you have to or feel like you have to report on to show your value? I'll bring up the chat here. Feel free to come off mute or answer in the chat, or I can move on.
It's Maria Sturgeon. I'll start.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is good. Like I think what I've done in the past too is a bit different than what I'm doing now because my current role, the company, it's a newer program for them. So I'm trying to also like stress that some of these numbers I don't think are strategic. So for example, the one thing I was given when I first came in was just new nominations. They needed new nominations for companies that would be advocates. But my, pushback was it's not really the number of people we have in the database, it's what they're doing for us, the value that leads to. And of course, that leads back to revenue influence, but also like how many prospects and customers are they influencing? And then going back to like when these prospects become customers, can we get them to be advocates and what are they doing? And not only in just like the sales references, but the marketing references too. So like, how are they changing our brand perception? How are we using them? But that's not easy. It's hard to measure, right? Because they're not like succinct measurements. So my point was, again, I'm just trying to kind of push back. So what I'm trying to do is like attach myself to some of the more strategic programs that we're doing. So we have like our customer success team is leading this top 100 with our top 100 users. So I'm trying to like validate their referenceability. And the team is loving it. Like I put together a spreadsheet and I've been like really focused on making sure those people are in our database because you want your best customers to be in there. And then if they're not, why aren't they? Are there, customer health issues or what? And then what are they doing? So as I engage people for like speaking engagements, et cetera, I'm also looking at this top 100 list. But just kind of attaching yourself to those more strategic initiatives versus just, like new nominations. Like that doesn't mean a lot for me. It's like, what are they doing? So I know that was just kind of a ramble, but.
It was certainly not a ramble, Maria. And I think you're getting to the point of the same thing that I was mentioning, which is somebody else has said, this is a value metric that we want you to have. And you're coming back and saying, no, let's think about this differently. Yes, that is a value metric, but does that really help us in the long run? Is it moving us forward? And that's a squishy metric that's hard for people who exist in the data field or the like dollars and cents field to understand. But there are so many different variables in what we do, right? Yes, like sales is like has a variable of somebody signing a check or agreeing to it, but the area that we operate in, it has so many external approvals or variables that it's hard for us to be like, yes, we're going to say we're going to produce this many things, because we could say that and we could produce them, but we could have 10 people after we produce it have their comms team say no, right?
Yeah.
So what I really appreciate the way you went about that, I would say.
Yeah. Well, even our customer success group with this top 100, our goal is we're looking at it from like logo rights and then public storytelling. So case studies, speaking engagements, if they're willing to do something public, and then kind of sales references. And some of the targets are like, well, don't you want all these to be 100%? And I'm like, well, absolutely. You would love for those to all be 100%, but they're never going to be like some of the customers, you have to dig into their health scores. So I'm not going to nominate these folks just to nominate them too. If there's issues, you don't want them on a call. So it's also pushing back with things to be more strategic, but doing it in a way that, is super positive. But yeah, it's getting to like new metrics. And so that's something I'm trying to push here, which has been a bit different from my previous companies because I managed more like long-term programs. So tracking revenue influence, all that stuff was like a lot easier. So anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and it's great. And I want to pick on something you just said in terms of the 100% metric, right? And I forgive me for going down the sports metaphor rabbit hole, but I'm a huge sports fan. I'm sure everybody here has heard of Steph Curry before.
Yeah.
Steph Curry is by far the best by any metric 3-point shooter ever, right? Has the most, still playing, Every 3-pointer he makes will make him further and further out from somebody else. Anybody care to guess what his career three-pointer make percentage is?
No.
Guesses? Okay, that's fine. His
I'm
make
going to say not
percentage,
high, actually. I'm going to say not high.
yes. His make percentage is 42.6%.
Mhm.
That
Oh my God.
means
Totally
the
surprising.
best 3-point shooter agreed upon by any other metric ever misses more than half of the time. I get that we are in a much different scenario, but why should we set ourselves up for metrics or deliverables and have to hit 100% of the time, when if we look at industries across the spectrum, 100% is practically unattainable. If we set ourselves up for a goal, or even like we're going to do this and we know going out for it we can't do that, if we've basically drawn a line in the sand, we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
We had a few other metrics come in on chat.
Yeah.
Steven said percent growth in customer add-ons. Kendra said influence on revenue. Kelly says MQLs, closed win, retention, improvement. And Lauren says cross-sell expansion, lead generation.
Yeah, and I'll go from the bottom up. I'm looking at the chat, Mary. Thank you for getting us back to that. Lauren's point is well taken. I go back to what I say. My story is unique. Our team is not responsible for cross sell and expansion lead generation. It all depends on where you are in the business. So I don't mean to cast aspersions on that one. I just don't have the expertise to talk through it, and so I'm going to learn from past mistakes and not talk about something I don't know about. So we're just going to learn. If you want to talk more about that, I would cede the floor to you.
I mean, it's one of many goals, but I think it's one that feels like sort of because it's the most quantifiable, gets a lot of attention. So I'm interested to see what other metrics we can be putting out there to help us show a more rounded picture of what we do. Because actually those cross-sell activities are either they're a piece of it or they're the end of a very long set of other programs. And so I think if we can better demonstrate value along the way, that'll improve a lot overall.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and kind of sits with my main thesis at the end of this. So hopefully as we get there, you'll see how sort of shifting the mindset of numbers to more existential value metrics can help as you get there. Because you brought up a good point. It's not like it's you go from nothing to cross-sell lead generation. There's a lot of different points along the way, right? And so hopefully we'll get to that point. MQLs, close win retention improvement, all great ones. I think one of these things, and also from influence on revenue, that goes back to how do we define our part in it, right? I'm going to break my rule. I'm mentioning it again. I mentioned that our team has affected 36.05, give or take, $1 million in close win business over the 3 years that I've been here, right? Do I think that we're personally responsible for that? Absolutely not. Just like no one conversation that a salesperson has, just like no one webinar or other marketing touch is. So, like, how do you define what percentage is that means, right? That's where it gets hard. If we are all, and I bring this up a little bit later, if we are all saying we affect revenue or we affect X percentage or X number, is somebody actually out there defining at your business or otherwise what percentage a reference call equals, or what percentage a putting somebody up on stage or writing a case study equals? And does all of those little percentages actually add up to 100%, or do they add up to 14,500% because everybody is trying to be the person, the team that affects all of this money? Cool. I'm looking through here more. Awesome. Anybody else have answers to question 1 here? Christine, I see. Spend more time trying to tie it closer to C-suite OKRs, which sometimes mean they change, and that's the point, right? Christine, is the less we are tied to an exact metric, an exact dollar amount, an exact percentage, what have you, the more flexible we can be when things change. You know, one of the things I've learned, this is now my second startup, is that nothing is like, everything starts out at the beginning of the quarter as the top priority, right? 5 seconds into that quarter, after the OKRs are finished being written and set in stone or whatever, something else comes along and that top priority, and they just say, now, fuck it, we're done with that, we're moving on, right? Because something has changed, the market has changed, this product is failing or whatever, right? So we have to be less rigid.
Can I ask a question, Daniel? So I come, from customer success, but I believe strongly in, working closely with customer marketing. And I know sometimes the teams don't always work well together, but, I think that they should. And so that's what I usually advocate for. And part of what I try to help more CS leaders do is to quantify. Right, because sometimes they're short on that, they're shy on that. I know marketing it tends to perhaps quantify more than doing the kind of squishy qualification stuff, these days. But CS, tends to be more squishy, and they need to get more quantified. And part of what we try to do is quantify what kinds of ways in which they're impacting qualified leads, CS qualified leads, CSQLs, and qualified advocates, CSQAs is kind of how I refer to it. And really talk about then what they've done throughout the post-sales journey to get people to that point where they become advocates, so that then they're actually tracking how successful those advocates are. Are they, participating in the things that marketing needs, and what level of participation rate, how broad and deep does it go across their accounts, as well as what is the monetary impact? How are they impacting referrals, and then how well do those referrals do? And connecting that all the way up the line to when they've impacted onboarding or other things, throughout, how it leads to those advocates and that sort of thing, right? So I'm really trying to get them to quantify in the ways that pre-sales motions in marketing and sales are used to doing. And I feel like it's a little shy on the post-sales. So that kind of goes in the face of what you're talking about. And so I wanted, to talk about how they might complement each other. Or do you just feel like it's just so over quantified that it's falling on deaf ears?
I don't think it's over quantified, right? I think the core here, and I might be giving away the end here, which is everything you're talking about is helping their core constituency, like the core CS constituency, get from point A to point B faster, right? Mm-hmm. But in each individual time, in each individual person and place, they are defining what point A and point B are. So I'm not saying, I'm not here to say number metrics aren't good. What I'm trying to say is don't let somebody else define what those metrics are for you.
Yeah.
Because then we get in a position where we're trying to meet something that is not realistic, that doesn't even take into account everything we're working on. That, to your point, you're trying to find these great areas for them to feel good about or for them to see value in. And if we've let somebody else come in and say, this is what your value is, how would you ever grow as an organization? How would you ever mature as an organization if you're the one that's supposed to be leading it, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, which is also like, oftentimes CS leaders don't have a seat at the executive table. And so then they're told, this is what the size of your team will be, or they're told this is what quota you're going for and should produce, when in fact, they need to step up with what the right size is and what they should be working on. They need to step up with what are the projections, as opposed to, you know, what is the quota that I can deliver, kind of thing. So things like that. Yeah, I get that. Okay.
So,
Cool.
awesome. Well,
Thanks.
no problem. Thank you. I am cognizant of time, so let me move on to the second question. If I click back here, which is, what is the top line value metric that you wish you could use to show your value? In case anybody's wondering why I'm looking over there, I have the chat over on my second screen. I'm not just sort of shifting over my gaze to something else.
I wish that I could always just report on sentiment, and that sentiment could be the metric that we report on regularly.
Is that sentiment of the customer or?
Yeah, customer sentiment.
And I think that's very valuable. And is it, Alexi, let me ask you, is there a reticence on the part of people like you're working for that don't believe it?
Well, I think the real issue is that, like, across the number of organizations that I support, there's actually not a good measurement of customer sentiment. So while I can have a one-to-one conversation with a customer and we can determine, you know, qualitatively that yes, their sentiment is good, when we look at like where that's reported, whether it be in an advocacy tool or in Salesforce or another CRM, it's not owned by customer marketing traditionally. It's not updated by customer marketing traditionally. There are benefits to those who own it to inflate it or deflate it based on their own agenda. So in terms of a reporting structure or using it strategically as something to report on, I don't think it's a strong option in the environments that I'm in, but it's tied directly to like all of the things that matter, both for the revenue side of the operation and the sort of like qualitative side of the operation. So stories and events and co-marketing, as well as like positive renewals and expansions and continued sort of like depth and breadth of the relationship with the company as a whole.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I completely agree that like getting a customer health score or satisfaction score is hard. I think I've been asking for something along those lines for 3+ years. But I think you bring up a good point there, or like in how you described it. If you take measurement of all of the things that you would want to go into that said thing, you can start sort of tracking an unofficial or, you know, back of the napkin math version of it. Because if those are the things you see or have access to, then you can also define what that is and take out the bias that you talk about. Well, you have to guard against your own bias, I suppose, but bias that you talk about when it comes to whoever owns that metric at the organizations you support.
Does anyone else have a top line value metric they wish they could use to show value?
If not, that's totally fine. We exhausted a lot of the conversation on question one, so that's totally fine. And Alexi, forgive me, I misspoke. Not satisfaction sentiment is what I meant. So apologies on that. And then Mary, I think you also answered this in the Slack channel, which is number of activities driven. Was that, I think you meant that as like ones you wish to report on? I was unsure exactly given where the slash was, but if that is one, that totally makes sense.
I wish it showed it made more of an impact to show like these are how many reference calls we were able to deliver, and things like that, because I found that a lot of times the KPIs or metrics are around, double the size of the community, or like not great metrics. I could probably do better with a class myself on just how to better create those those metrics and have an impact on the KPIs that I'm, agreeing to. But I wish it were like, look at all of this work we're doing, instead of that revenue number, because like you've said, all the different teams are kind of vying for that. Well, I impact this much of the revenue, I impact that much of the revenue, but the thing is at the end of the day, sales is the one that really gets to own that, usually more so than other teams. And you can't all say, well, I'm impacting $4 million in revenue when there's only $4 million in revenue. So it's almost to the point where it seems like it doesn't make an impact anymore, because when you say that, like, it's very, okay, that's what everybody says. So I kind of wonder what leadership thinks about that, and what would be a better way to show that value for any of the teams, really.
Yeah, it's a conundrum, right? And it goes back to, just as you were saying, that it's the whole like concept of the movie The Incredibles, right? If everybody's super, nobody's super. If everybody's producing, if everybody is saying I did 4 million, I influenced $4 million, then nobody did, right? It's like you cannot believe any but one person that says I impacted 100% of that.
Right.
And we're not even taking into account the impact that the sheer need that the customer had, right? If you're a security firm and you're trying to sell into somebody that just got hacked, right? You're already selling to somebody who has a desire to get that fixed very quickly. So things of that nature. All right, cool. So my question's back to you then. If you take a look at question one before, right? If you're looking at those metrics that you feel like you have to get to, that you feel like, to Maria's point, you have to hit 100% of that. How many times have you found yourself unhealthy, whether it's mentally or physically, because your metrics aren't coming together? We all know that feeling. We all know that like pit in your stomach feeling where you're like, something isn't right. And I would imagine it's coming more and more as we're watching. Hopefully, I know it comes in waves, but as we've watched people in our industry lose their jobs simply because executives think we're expendable.
So I'm a little obsessed with that right now with my dashboard, because I'm so like, conscious of the fact that customer marketers are getting laid off, and I was part of a layoff, like just making that impact. So I'm like watching the deals, especially this week since it's Q2 close. Like, did the references I support, like, are the deals closing? Did we win those? Did we lose those? What's going on? So yeah, I think we're also conscious of it because of the fact there has been such a shift and an impact in our industry, especially the last 2 years. I mean, we're still kind of seeing it, but so yeah, I'm a bit obsessive over it, but it's also due to my type A personality. So
yeah, we are all the sum of our parts, right? We are all the sum of our experiences. So it totally makes sense. But I would then challenge back to you, and again, I'm referencing a little bit of what I'll get into in a couple seconds, which is just because like you could have provided the most perfect reference, right? It could have been amazing.
Yeah.
But something else caused that deal not to close. And if we put that pressure on ourselves, and it fails, and it had nothing to do with us, and we don't take in that possibility, we have put that guilt that craziness on us because we've said that's the thing that we're going to judge ourselves by, yet we have no control, even if we have done 100% of what we needed to do, if that thing closes.
Yeah, totally agree with you.
And Kelly, I see in the chat, like, you spent many nights without sleep because I have too. Not so much at Grafana, because this is sort of where this epiphany happened for me. And why I'm so passionate about telling it to other people. But we find ourselves so stressed, so strung out, that we end up making poor decisions as to what to do next in terms of what we're going to do. We start doubling down on things that maybe were bad to begin with, or we think, or like, hey, well, what I did before isn't making an impact. Let me try to do something else before taking a step back and be like, did I actually make an impact? Okay, cool. Was there external circumstances that made that impact blunted, or blunted that impact, as it were? The second question is, and this is related to what I just said, like, what do you do when that happens? Do you work harder? Like, you're already working. I'm sure every one of us on this call is working as hard as you possibly can. It's not like we're phoning this in. No pun intended, because we're literally on a call right now. None of us are going, 40%. I'm not saying we're all at 100% revved up at every time. If we're revving at 80% of the time, 80% at any given moment, that's good, because that gives us room to grow when we have to. But if you're revving at 100% of the time, all the time, and somebody's like, hey, guess what? You need to do more, or you feel like you're failing, can you actually exist at 100% of your available energy all the dang time without crashing? Or on the flip side, do you take a step back and say, Daniel, why did you miss an E on this? But that's supposed to say, how did you get here to begin with? And if you don't do that, you're going to set yourself up for failure the next time. Like, I go back to it. How did we get here? How did I let myself be judged or feel like I'm not performing because I didn't help close 100% of this revenue, or I didn't help move us from from 1 million to 2 million, or from one customer to 5 customers? Maybe it's time to take a step back and say, we need to change the way we look at value, or how you value what you bring to the table, not just as a professional, but as a person, right? If you value your personhood at a business, or your personhood in general, because it's hard to sometimes not mix personal with business, or business the way it bleeds into your personal life. You start thinking you're not providing value, it gets a little dark in how to divorce yourself from business life and personal life. And that can cause a lot of problems when it comes to your availability to be available at home, your availability to just be able to enjoy different parts of life. If you're always thinking about, well, shit, I didn't hit that metric, or shit, I have to do more. And then even worse, I would imagine this kind of goes into the losing sleep part, is like, well, what do I have waiting for me tomorrow morning when I wake up? If I actually am able to go to sleep, for that matter. And so this is my controversial take. You may have probably guessed it, which is value is something that we as customer marketers should set. And it shouldn't have to be bound to monetary, or something monetary, or some numeric report. Maria, I know you talked about, you sit there and look at the reports all the time. I look at reports all the time too, just to sort of, it's an input, but it is not the end all be all, right? It is an input to let me know how things are going. It's a pulse check. But just in the same way that the human body, you can do a pulse check and say, okay, cool, your heart rate's going fine. But guess what? There can be a lot of other good things happening, or a lot of external certain things that are changing the reason why your pulse is doing whatever. I've been spending a lot of time at the doctors recently, right? Who doesn't have a high blood pressure when they go to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, your blood pressure spiked. No shit, I just walked up 3 flights of stairs and I'm at the doctor. What do you think my blood pressure is going to do?
I know, and I think a lot of it too, and I think a lot of it is like accumulation from. I mean, I'm not young by any means. I've been in this business a long time, and like I've been so driven by numbers, but also like the impact of how the other cultures were, other companies, and I've worked for great companies. Don't get me wrong, but the company I work for now, it's even hard to describe their culture because it's so great. Like I love this slide, Daniel, because my boss said to me, we had a review a couple, months ago, and I'm so focused on just like numbers too, and the strategic value I'm kind of bringing tied back to the objectives. But she said two things to me, which meant the world, and that's I need to like change my mindset to go back to the like sleepless nights. She said, number one, she goes, people here really enjoy working with you. And that was like super valuable. But she said, we are also measuring like this program by the number of like just the number of requests that come in because people know about the program more. Like I'm keeping all the like messages. I did trainings for marketing and sales when we relaunched the program. They're like, oh my God, I didn't know this existed. Like, and that's how they're also like, which is good. But to me, it's like, well, they should know about it. Like, but I also need to like take a step back for myself and realize exactly what you're saying. It's not just the numbers. It's like, what's the value you're bringing? So I like this. I love the mindset here. And so I think sometimes we just get into our head so much because we are so stressed about producing those numbers, versus kind of like, what is the real value to the organization?
Exactly. What's the impact you are having each and every day? Can I measure the monetary impact that a conversation had? Can I measure if I send somebody a link to a story because they've asked a question, can I measure that in some sort of, it helped them get this much time back or whatever? No, but I know that I'm having an impact each and every day, and I can feel good about that. And guess what? If it's in public, you're seeing people, you're seeing people react or ask more questions or like tag you in things, that means the impact that you are having is you are becoming a trusted part of the organization. People won't reach out. Like there are a couple of reasons why people won't reach out. An education part, like they just don't know about it, right? Cool. So we have to do more. You're talking about, doing a lot of enablement. Awesome. The other reason why people don't reach out or don't ask questions is because they don't trust what you have to say. They don't think that you could help them get from point A to point B faster. They have thought about a different way. The more people reach out, that is a sign of impact. That is a sign of value. And you should take that as a compliment of like, cool, I am a trusted part of this organization. And I'm going to do it. That's how I'm going to, that's how I'm going to get my endorphins. So let me, break this down even further, right? I said this before, we got hired to do a job, which means every one of us interviewed with multiple people to get the job that we have. Whether it is a contracting position, a full-time position, you're doing consulting, somebody has asked you, what are you going to bring to this role? And I'm guessing in that role, you have talked about in that interview process, you talked about what you're going to do. And the moment we get hired, all of a sudden we're like, cool, I'm here. What do you think customer marketing should be doing? And it's part of like, we get this sort of imposter syndrome. But if we flip it on its side, they hired you to do the thing because they liked what you said. So why not just do the thing that you said you were going to do and define that success that way? Sure, you can consult with them, but they've already kind of given you your tacit, their tacit acknowledgement, like that's actually what we want at this business. Second point, I'm going to drill this home. If we are all claiming that money, we are all competing against everybody else. And sometimes the leadership will defer to somebody else. If you're not lucky enough where I am, which is our CMO is very much like we are the sum of our parts. It's no one No one is the 100% of this deal. In fact, if he sees a salesperson saying, hey, this was 100% sales, he's like, let me go back to the data and show you where they attended an event 3 years ago. They're not just, this isn't just a cold call. If we free ourselves up from that monetary thing, or from forcing us to figure out we affected 3.5% of this deal because we answered a question, it's a lot easier to get past that. And this is the core thesis, right? If you get yourself away from the monetary, from the numeric thing, and think about it more in a, did I help someone get from point A to point B faster today? It becomes a lot easier to see the value that you are producing and that you can say that you're producing, right? And you can apply that standard to, you know, a reference call. You can apply that standard to a case study. You can apply that standard to every single metric that we've already talked about. But you are no longer beholden to, I must affect $8 million in deals. I must add 10 new MQLs. I must add all of these things. Did I today help somebody get from point A to point B faster? And even better, you let the person that your customer, right? Whether it's sales, whether it's CSM, whether it's executives, whether it's your own external customers, you let them define what point A and point B are. And then you act and you're agile and you help them in that situation. And that way you can actually see it happening and other people can see you providing value. That's a little, you know, broad. So let's take some looks at some examples, right? Here are 3 examples. Sales is looking for a reference. Your customers are speaking at an event, but you're concerned about their presentation. And sales says, we need more case studies despite you having a glut already. If we were thinking about it before, example 1, sales is looking for a reference. You're like, cool, I'm going to find the exact thing that they need right now because it's going to affect 100% of the deal. That is stressful. Like, you could spend a lot of cycles finding everything and it might not work out. And to Maria's point, or like what we were talking about before, if you're beholden to only, saying we got to find something that has the best effects to close something, if you spend all that time and energy and it doesn't close, like, you're kind of like, well, that sucked. We're not going to, we're not going to show any value, and so on and so forth. So how does my mindset and my thought process really look at it? In example 1, like, you just make it easier for them to find it and in a way that gets them moving on to the next thing, right? It's not just you either answer their question or you send them a link or you teach them how to find it, right? When I say reference, I'm not necessarily saying reference call. I'm just saying some sort of reference piece of content. I don't have to produce a new thing if I have a thing already. I can just be like, hey, it's here, and here's how you find it next time. Teach them to fish, right? Don't just always be on the hook, because not only have you helped them answer that question now, you've helped them answer a lot of questions going forward. You've provided value because you have helped them get from point A to point B faster. And that's not monetary. Then the second one. So you spend your time every week before their talk, bringing in other experts, SMEs on their talk, making them feel comfortable. You have helped your customers get from point A to point B faster, of being scared to, hey, I can give this great presentation. And the reason why it's not, I say not directly monetarily or numeric, but keep tabs, is because you are giving them that white glove treatment, you have fostered that relationship. My guess is that over time, that relationship will grow. You have shown them that your company cares. And this is why I know it's numeric, but we kind of track, one of the reports I look at is how much money have companies spent after they have done some sort of advocacy with us. Again, I'm not saying that we affected it in terms of that exact dollar amount, but I can see we are helping our customers feel better about growing. And then finally, sales says we need more case studies despite you having a glut already. I think we've all been in a situation where sales is like, we need more references. We have none. I mean, it's the same thing that demand gen gets. We're like, we need more leads. You're like, no, you don't. You just need to know how to do it better. And the idea here is you could, and I've done this before, you could say, okay, fine, we've produced 100 of them, we'll produce 150 of them now, right? Whatever. It puts a lot of stress on you to try to find these stories, to try to produce this. Anybody get my Star Wars reference here? If you do, well done. If you don't, I will tell you, it's from episode 6. It's from Return of the Jedi. It's when Darth Vader comes and says the Emperor is coming to the Death Star, and Moff Gergerard says, okay, we'll double our efforts. And so you could double your efforts and say, wait, we have and say, okay, cool, we're going to do this, but that's going to be stressful, and it's going to take you away from other things that you're supposed to be doing. It's going to take you away from the ability to get other people from point A to point B faster. Or you could say, wait, what are they really looking for? Is this more of an education or a problem that they're not seeing everything that we have? Well, if we know what the problem is they're trying to solve, like what is the story that they need? What is the use case they need? What is the industry they need? Perhaps it's just a format problem. They're like, we need more banking case studies. Well, we have 4 of them. Maybe just repackage the 4 you have into like our company in banking. Here are 4 different quotes. And guess what? If you have those 4 other case studies already, those quotes are already approved. Just repackage them. That is value, and you are helping them and yourself get from point A to point B faster. And that is the end of my presentation. So that's me saying thanks, and I'll see you on the flip side, because I am, like I said, anywhere from 1 minute to 4 weeks from being on paternity leave.
Yay! That's going to be awesome. I'm happy for you. Thank you for hopping on and sharing this with us. There's a lot to unpack here. I think it'll be worth listening to a lot again. Yeah, just great information. I'll get it in the newsletter next week. And actually, there's no call next Friday. So everyone have a great 4th of July weekend. And then I will see you all in the community as we continue. Oh yes, Jan would like the link to the slides. Yeah, I'll see you all in the community as we
actually, there was on the last slide, there was a link. Oh, perfect. That's what I was looking for. Cool.
Yeah, that presentation is actually a broader is a presentation I gave at the Customer Marketing Summit in San Francisco. Well, I guess it was in Oakland last year. And the value part is part of a broader behavioral change presentation that I gave, which I'm also quite passionate about, not the least of which is because my wife is a board certified behavior analyst. So we spend a lot of time talking about behavior and how we can be better about it.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you, Mary, on that, but thank you, Daniel.
No problem. Okay, see you all in the community and talk soon. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.